My guest today was born in abject poverty. She describes how her and her family lived on less than $3 a day. Her mother was a teenage mother. Her father is a man she never knew. And at the age of 9, she was orphaned when her mother died as a result of HIV/AIDS. But that didn't deter this young woman. She has gone on to grab every opportunity that has been given to her, and she is now a communication strategist and a global speaker. She has spoken at the White House, on international stages before world leaders, and she has now also started a foundation focused on being an advocate for AIDS orphans, as well as against gender-based violence in South Africa.
We are Nico and Vince, and we're happy to be back here to announce an incredible speaker.
She has this incredible story about adversity and determination. Please welcome Mpumi Nobiva. Woo!
I come as one, but stand as 10,000. Tens of thousands of hopeful young people who believe that together we can make a real difference in this world. I come as one, but stand as 100,000. Hundreds and thousands of hopeful young immigrants who come to America with hopes to build better lives for themselves and their families back home. Indeed, I come as one, but I stand as an estimated 3.7 million AIDS orphans in South Africa, with close to half of us losing our parents to AIDS-related diseases. My name is Nompumelelo Nobiva. I am from Johannesburg, South Africa.
Mpumi, I am so thrilled to finally being the operative word. Girl, well, let's start with very important things, right? The hair.
The hair, honey, yes. This was the best decision I've ever made for myself. Mm-hmm. This was a spiritual choice. I've cut my hair before, but it was more cosmetic then. I knew that I was turning 25. 25 was a big year for me. My mother was 25 when she was diagnosed with HIV. She was dead by 27, gone. And so I knew that 25 is an important, significant year for everyone, but especially for me, because I could, in contrast, place my life and my mother's life and see what grace had done, see what service and humility and people who've sowed into my life, what that has done. I could see what goodwill has done, you know, and I wanted to be in a space where I could really just give to myself and see myself. I moved to LA. I live in downtown Los Angeles working with a tech company, but I really wanted to experience California. I wanted to hike up the mountains, get into the beach, dive into an ocean, go to the gym. And that's sometimes hard when you got a lot of hair to deal with. You know what I'm saying?
I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Don't want to sweat out that press.
You wear it so well. It's so gorgeous.
You wear it so well.
Thank
You wear it so well.
Thank
You talk about your mom. So let's start right there. Tell me about your mother.
Oh, my mother was just an amazing, beautiful young girl. Her name was Nobiva. And she was born and raised in South Africa during apartheid. She was born in the 70s. And, you know, she was born into a world that was not built for a young girl like her to thrive. You know this, just systematically designed to just break you. And what overlayers that is then the patriarchy in our African communities that doesn't address necessary conversations and just the grooming of every young girl. So my mother, you know, she's a girl who fell pregnant when she was 17, madly in love with my father. He was 22. And He didn't stick around much after I was born. I think there was a family conflict because my mom is Zulu, part Xhosa, but my father is Zulu, so I think there was a bit of a tribalism thing, and he left. But my mom was just, in my memory, she was just this vivacious, alive, beacon of hope sort of woman, always lit up a room. She's actually the first woman I ever saw with a bald head, and I thought, good God, that is gorgeous, Always had so much life in her, and she's so special because, after I was born, we lived at Zonkizizwe. This is where I was born, Zonkizizwe. It's a township in Johannesburg. And we lived there for about 3 years, but then there was a lot of conflict that was happening in Nkatha, ANC, and all of that. And this is post now the new democracy era, and we then had to flee, leave our shack because of all the conflict, and go to Johannesburg, southern suburbs, where I lived in Rosettenville. I mean, it's a suburb, but really far from what comes to mind or what you see when you actually visit a suburb. It's an area that has a lot of gang-related activity, high drug abuse, just the living conditions there are deplorable. But this is where we moved to. I was about 3 years old, and my mother at the time, she moved to the city. She was in Johannesburg CBD, fending, trying to make ends meet. She knew she had a baby girl she needed to provide for. She was now a single mother. She couldn't finish school, and she tried every job. My mom worked as a security guard. She sold vegetables. She worked as a she worked everything down to prostitution. And when she was 25 years old, I used to love having her visit, because when I speak, people think maybe because I lived in poverty that I had no love. I had a lot of love in my life. My grandmother was just my embrace. But even my mom, even though she couldn't be there when she would come and visit, honey, she used to know how to do hair. She would do me up and then bring me those nice outfits from Ebrina, say Love Street. Woo! I loved it. She was like a big sister, a big, like I had big mommy and small mommy. Small mommy would come every other weekend. And, she was just the light of my life. That person who just came with new knowledge, new information, new outfits. She lit everything up. And when she was 25, she found out she was HIV positive. And what I respect so much about that young woman, and I connect to her in that way because I'm 25 now. So she was bold enough to sit down with me and recognize my humanity and share her story with me. My mother said, Mtanam again was, and she says, Umama Zoshona, I'm HIV positive. I was 8 years old.
How do you at 8? Did you even
I didn't know
understand
what
that
was,
meant?
But I knew what death was. I didn't know what AIDS was. I knew what death was because the year before she had suffered a miscarriage. And my brother, Usamgelo, didn't make it. So she had to explain to me what Ukshana was, so I knew what that was. And in that moment, it's as if she could tell my whole world just crumbling apart with confusion and question, because she just held me by the face and she said, "Guzomelo Qhubeka, you must go on, because you will be different."
I was orphaned at the age of 9 when my mother died of AIDS, and I do not know who my father is. My mother, a young, ambitious, beautiful Zulu woman with dreams far beyond her reach. She had to face the reality of her soon approaching death. I imagine, Wide, that this must have been extremely difficult since very little was to be said about her sickness. My mother, like many in South Africa, was stigmatized by those who are fearful of HIV and AIDS. But she still found it in her spirit to recognize my humanity and share her story with me.
When we moved to the southern suburbs, the very first thing my grandmother did is put me in a church. This is where I learned how to speak English. This is where I learned how to share stories. I would drive my family crazy every time I came from church, because I'd come and set up these acts and tell these stories. And I guess it was the birth of what I do now. But that was my mother. And for the next 1 year, 6 months, it was complete chaos and pain. But there was something about that conversation she had had with me that kept me in a very calm state, to the point where I was always even honest about what was happening in my life.
Mpumi, Something you shared, I heard recently, was actually how your mother contracted the disease. Can you share about that?
Yeah, she, it's interesting because when she was in the city living as a prostitute, I found this out when I was 21 years old. The woman, her name is Helen, she, I guess, was the one person who my mother could talk to about these things. She's Caucasian, English, so it's easier to have these conversations, I guess. My mother, my mother's second name is Colleen. So here I am, I'm 21. I'm trying to celebrate my birthday, and Helen calls me. She says, I want to talk to you. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a long time, but I never felt like you were old enough. But your mother, Colleen, was a very special woman because when she found out that she was HIV positive, she came and told me, and the only thing she could think about was you, and she was worried about what's going to happen to you. And if you know the history of the time, then you know that my mom is a part of a huge population that was wiped out in the early 2000s because of the AIDS epidemic, and how we weren't able to get resources and medical care in time, because it's absolutely ludicrous that millions of young people were lost in that way when ARVs were, at our disposal. But Helen says to her, Colleen, I'm so frustrated with you. You're such a smart girl. How can you let this happen? She said, well, the man said if I had unprotected sex with him, he would give me 300 Rand, and Mpumi needed school shoes. That's less than $20.
With hearing something like that, how do you take that and how do you move forward in your life in terms of how do you honor your mother and the sacrifice that she really made?
I share her story with pride. And I talk about how proud I am to be her child. The one person I know who at 25 could own up to her reality and share it in such a compassionate way. You've got to be really special to see that far. And I think it's because of that conversation. I have no doubt that I stayed in line in that particular society and was able to be prepared. That and my grandmother's strength and prayers and her work in getting me to school every day, making sure that I was fed, even while my mother was dying. Those are the reasons I was able to meet that moment of opportunity when my life was changed through education. And so I have no ounce of shame. In fact, I'm honored that that's who I get to call my mother. I'm honored. And I'm proud of the way she lived. And I understand that life, threw its cards at her. And she did the best with what she thought she had, and that's just life as we know it. But I'm honored and feel deeply privileged that I get to share that narrative, because it's an alternative to what is currently still a very huge barrier to us overcoming this epidemic where we have the highest prevalence in the world. The first thing is stigma. Like we still can't get enough people just to a point where they understand that you are more than your circumstances, that you're bigger than that. And so for me, I understand that. I have no sense of shame or sense of feeling less than, because that's what I've come from. I understand that that didn't happen to me, it happened for me. That's the difference. It happened for me.
So talking about story is a big part of you, a big part of what you do. And I know you've started an initiative called Share Your Story.
Yes.
What's behind that? What's your intention? What do you want it to do?
Absolutely. So that also started just as a whim, that fire inside of me. Last year I lost the only father I knew, my grandfather. He had AIDS as well. And I was frustrated because I was scheduled to come in. We all knew he was making his departure. I was scheduled to come in that Saturday. He died on the Tuesday. But I was also in a place in my life where I was just wondering what it's going to take to break this cycle, even within our own close circles. And we've already seen how story has worked for me. I mean, it's transformed my life in incredible ways, and how I could bring that even into my own intimate relationships and spaces so that we could overcome that together. And then, of course, there's just the reality of the fact that as I sit here now, young women between the ages of 15 and 25 are at the greatest risk, 4 times more likely to contract the virus compared to their male counterparts. And then while I was there burying Umkhulu, that's when Lerato Mokoena died. She was, I think, number 20-something of a list of more than 60. No, actually, probably a bit higher, because in May alone, we lost over 60 women and girls to domestic violence, from intimate partner relationships to horrific crimes. And, you know, I was in panic mode. I recognized that there's a connection between the two socioeconomic issues, which was stigma and our inability to see our value and speak life into ourselves and others. So I wanted to just create a platform. I'd seen that young people, as a measure of desperation, and, you know, politics, we could get into that, but our young people having to take to Twitter to tell, you know, avoid this part of Bram, don't go this way in Ilof, there's a car kidnapping people. And I wanted to support that. I wanted to share that. When I came into the United States, nobody understood the magnitude of what this problem was, because, you know, our president at the time, Zuma, I mean, he was on a rape trial when he was elected into power. So it was no surprise to me that, I guess, losing a girl or woman's life is not enough to call an emergency, you know. At best, you're on a front page, you trend on Twitter for a couple of weeks, and then you're done for. It's like you never lived. That bothered me. So I came back. I used my capacity as a speaker, the influences in my space, to reach out. I wanted to raise awareness. At the time, I thought I was just going to fundraise about $16,000 for this event that would bring people together. We were going to do an event at Constitutional Hill, at the women's jail atrium, where Winnie Mandela was also captured. It felt like the right place. And fast forward, you know, right when I'm about to go live with that initiative, my uncle says, well, you might want to just look over your materials again, because at that point I'd gone online to take screenshots to try and teach the international community about what's happening. But we didn't know how legal that was, you know what I'm saying? And also, people had died. Karabo was gone. And she was a part of the women who were profiled. And, you know, if you see that and then you find out somebody's raising funds, then it can get a little tricky and messy. So my uncle just advised me, take your time. And I thought, who do I know who's in media, who understands the complexity of these things? So I made an effort to reach out to Ms. Winfrey's offices, and I expressed what we were doing, just this urgency I felt as a need to do something about what was happening, and how I had identified that stigma is really what we need to tackle, you know. And she then responded with, I will not only match 16,000, but I'll match up to 100,000 of what you fundraise. That campaign took off. It had a lot of life and support to it. We did a lot in terms of convening young people, raised money from like South Africa, Kenya, America, you know, Canada, all these places. And we grew too fast. We were growing too fast. And I recognized that we didn't have the necessary infrastructure to even uphold what we wanted, which is how I then moved to California, simply because the company that brought me there and the technology it has is what it would take to get that campaign into what it's becoming now. And that's how we then rebranded to Share Your Story Africa Initiative, where we basically work to empower and transform lives through skills development, leadership training, and storytelling. We are an initiative that, you know, counters humanitarian issues that disproportionately affect Africa's women and girls, but our strategies to empower the girl and the boy child to get those skills, to become community leaders, and then go back into the communities, become agents that raise that awareness both locally and internationally, but also channel funds and resources into these pockets where we still desperately need it.
Now, something else that you're doing, which you're launching April 1st, 2018.
Oh, yeah. I'm very excited about that. As you can see, it's a very intimate project. It's a space that I wanted to create where all of us could meet on a monthly basis here on camera around journaling and intention. And then, of course, on a weekly basis where I reach out to all the people who have subscribed. I send them resources, I answer their questions, and of course I go live on social media at the end of each month. So I am happy. Welcome to the official program launch of Journal and Intention Setting. That's the weekly journal and intention setting program. You know, every week we just gonna journal together. And every month we introduce a new intention, and then throughout the weeks we make sure we stay on that intention. You know, being the person that I am, I've studied a lot of the greats that I've been privileged to know or just get close enough to be able to analyze. And the people who are really special in terms of just greatness and make things happen are people who have a very strong sense of deliberate creation and very strong sense of discipline for themselves and their intention and how they move and how they attract something long before it even manifests in the physical realm. And so this is a space where I just am attempting to bridge the gap between our thought and consciousness leaders like your Eckhart Tolle, Dwayne Dyer, Oprah Winfrey, Deepak Chopra, and some of our celebrities, influencers who are starting to speak to that, but there's still a gap, because if you're in our age group, if you really want to be inspired, then you have to go 2 or 3 generations ahead of you, right? I mean, there are people in our age group who are doing a lot of amazing things, but I'd say on a consciousness level are still possibly even arriving to their greatness. So there seems to be an opportunity for there to be a platform where we can cultivate and harness that awareness together. And this program is just my offering, my extension of what I've done to be able to do and live the way I live. And just as a way to serve. And I'm excited to see how it's going to go. You know, it's a lot of work. It's a special and very personal thing, because it really gets into the minutiae of just even my own consciousness and how I deliberately create and attract things into my life, and how I'm very intentional about how I live and how I, even from a vibrational standpoint, the sort of things and people that I attract into my life. And that's something that, you know, we all know when someone speaks of it, it's like an awakened truth, like something we've forgotten. And, the first book we're going to look at is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And he speaks about that, about the fact that I'm not bringing you anything new. In fact, when you experience this material, which has nothing to do with any religion, it's just about consciousness, you feel it in yourself that, oh, that sounds like something.
So tell me, you've met all these amazing and inspiring people. You're doing this very inspiring thing.
Thank you.
Who inspires you the most?
My gran, hands down.
Tell me about
It takes a really special person, in my opinion, to go and clean houses, wake up every day at 5 a.m. from a back room when your children have nothing, and you go and clean houses and make something beautiful in your own motherland that you are denied because of your skin color. It takes a really special person to do that. My grandmother has been doing that since she was 14. I took her off the job when she was 70 when I was speaking. Now I'm fully responsible for her expenses, and I'm proud and honored to be able to do that. But that's a really special person. And she's not the only one. Our mothers, our grandmothers, they're lineages of women who strived and gave so that other families could experience what we were fully deserving. And she did that. This is something we have in common. My grandmother meant so much to me. My grandmother was a domestic for all of her working life. Yeah.
I learned so many great lessons
from. Too.
I know firsthand. What's the greatest lesson she taught you?
Oh, you gotta work hard. There's no shortcut to it. No matter what the conditions are, you've gotta pull your own weight. You know, my grandmother never complained. You know, I still have an image of her coming home limping. You know, sometimes she'd clean 3 to 4 houses. Sometimes the one house is 6 bedrooms, the other house is this. Sometimes they don't treat her right. You know, sometimes she's cleaning flats with 2 stairs, and then they make her even sweep the leaves on the streets, which you never get done because the leaves are falling all day. Yeah. Like tremendous injustices, you know. But she never complained. She never threw in the towel. Not until I said, like, that's enough, you know. Which a lot of people are still not able to do, which then speaks to the political climate and where we are in the country now, and why it's important for us to really change the narrative and the current conditions of unemployment, because it's just despicable.
And for you, Mpumi, you talked about how you've been able to, now through the amazing career that you have, take her off from having to do the house cleaning. Mm-hmm. What do you think she's most proud of you of?
That's a really good question. I think she's most proud of the fact that I've remained faithful to her. I think for a while she became a little fearful, because the more I would climb in terms of my education and early successes, the more I'd have family members coming out of the woodworks people who were never there. There was a time my grandmother was 53, I'm 9 years old. My mom is dying. We're trying to figure out what a CD4 count is. She's not educated, she's illiterate, I'm 9. We're looking at a medical journal trying to figure out what is killing the love of my life, really. And she's always been that person, my gran. You know, that tag team sort of worked together. She's always kept it real with me. She's always told me the truth about things. And I think she's just most proud to, perhaps even, I think her being proud of me is really her returning her own pride to herself, because that just shows, you know, I was writing about this in an application I'm working on right now around civic leadership. And the question is, where have I seen ethical leadership play out? And that's my grandmother. It means to do something, to do the right thing, even when nobody's watching, when your act of goodwill and good faith can stand a chance of going unnoticed, and you do it anyways. My grandmother didn't have to do what she did. She was 53 when I was orphaned. And she stepped in and she became my mother, my father, my world, my everything. She was 53. So I think for her to now see those fruits being brought back into her life is a beautiful thing. And for me, I'm just honored to be used in that way. You know, a lot of people want to feel sorry for me when I share this, because it's like, oh, you're still young, you're this, you're that. You know, and but I'm proud to be able to do that for her, because she deserves that.
Mpumi, you and I could talk all day long. We really could. Where can people find you? Where can they find more information about the programs that you're working on?
Absolutely. So MpumiNobiva.live is the new platform. I still own the .com domain, but we're using that for larger things. So .live is the current one. Instagram is a great way to stay current and connect. That's Mpumi_Nobiva. I'm starting to grow my Twitter. I'm actually, as extroverted as I am, I'm a really private person. You know, I'm quite recluse, I enjoy, so it's taking a lot for me to open up on these social platforms. Instagram is easier because you just put a picture, but Twitter, it's your thoughts, it's your emotions, your bear. So I'm starting to make that effort. Facebook, these videos will be going through my website, but will be alive on YouTube as well for people who can't access them. The greatest thing you can do if you're watching this and you really want to receive the best that I'm trying to offer is to subscribe to the program as we have it, because the people who have subscribed are the people who I will be funneling and channeling resources to. So like, for instance, the first month the book is The Power of Now. I've gone as far as also now summarizing and sending notes for that, because I recognize that I could have a young girl or a young boy in a township or rural area who can't immediately get the book. So through email, they can easily download that PDF and continue to be a part of that community. And I'm building that community because those are the first people I want to know when I'm in their cities, so that we can have time to, you know, unpack the realities of life and how to cope and how to be good and kind to each other. So while it's a shameless shout out to say subscribe, it really is the only way that I can serve in a space where there's a container, because I also have to ensure that my work, my art is being given and channeled in a safe space. And that's just the best way I know how to right now from an international standpoint.
Final question, because I know you've got to run.
I'm chasing immigration in Canada. I'm headed to the airport.
This platform is called Ndini. Ndini in my mother tongue means I am.
I am, yeah.
I am.
That is powerful.
What is your I am?
Oh man, I am, simply put, I am that which comes from the source of life itself. That's it. I am, if you go to the ocean and you scoop a mug, in that mug you have all the contents of that ocean. So I carry in me all the contents of my creator. And I'm also my mother's child.
You are doing amazing things, and I'm so grateful, so grateful that you've made time for me.
Thank you for your patience.